I made this argument to a very senior American officer on my last deployment in 2019. He came to the outstation where I was working with my team, pulled us off to the side and said, "Hey guys, I've been charged to come up with some answers for some hard questions. What do you guys think?" And my answer was, we had two options for the war in Afghanistan, and we've missed both of them. The first option was May 2nd, 2011. The night before that, we had killed Osama bin Laden in a direct action raid just over the border. At that point, you pull chalks, you leave, and the Afghans can determine their fate.
Right.
And we would help them with diplomacy, with international aid, but they would be allowed to determine their future because our military objectives at that point had essentially been achieved. So that was the first off-ramp that we missed. The second off-ramp that we missed, and Steve loves to make his World War II references because they are so profound and they apply here just as well. We already had the answer to Afghanistan at the very least because we've done it in the past. We're still in Germany. We are still in Japan. We are still in South Korea. We fought wars over those pieces of land and then turned them into our best friends in those regions.
Right.
If we wanted to succeed in Afghanistan, we invaded, we knocked off the Taliban, we eroded Al-Qaeda, and we should have stayed there for as long as it took at some capacity, making them our best friend in the Central Asian subcontinent.
Yeah.
That was our other off-ramp that we missed. So that may be controversial, but as a historian and a policy guy, that's my read on the Afghan aspect. Iraq is a separate kettle of fish entirely. So,
right.
Well, I mean, to one thought that occurs to me, what we were talking about earlier, where we were taking an operational concept and trying to make it a strategy. How did the Taliban manage to get back in? We were hearing for at least a couple of years, the Taliban actually controls about 80% of the Afghan countryside. How are we going to fight that with, okay, we'll send out a team out to that province and they'll be there for a couple of weeks and kick down some doors, and then we're going to send another team over here. Was that part of why we couldn't make them our friends?
Everything you said, Steve, is very insightful in that as we're having this open forum dialogue, I would encourage every listener to go read the book The Hardest Place by Wes Morgan. It talks about exactly that, counterinsurgency, and it's like why it failed, and he focuses on the Pech Valley in Kunar. It's one of the best books about the war in Afghanistan that has ever been written. Wes is a dear friend of mine, a great mentor in terms of writing, but yes, you send an SF team, they live there for a year, they build these connections and relationships, and for a low context society versus a high context society, that's the division of worlds, where us being in Afghanistan, a place that many locations in Afghanistan have not changed in 2,000 years.
Right.
They had never seen, one of my favorite stories, a dear friend to you and I, JD, and Steve, I don't know if you know, I know you know of him, but Robert Zachary, right? African American, he's gone everywhere and done everything, right? But for him to go to places in Afghanistan where he might have been the first black person an Afghan has ever seen in their existence, right? That's the type of world where we were operating as a modern society. For us, we don't think anything of it. For a very tribalist society, like, this is a clash of not just ideologies, but entire universal views.
Yeah.
So we take these SF teams and they stay there for 12 months, and then they just rotate back. It takes 12 months to make a relationship with that village elder.
Right.
For them to get to where, okay, maybe we can trust these Americans who, why you guys versus the Taliban? What's the benefit of, there's a phrase, I use it in the book, we've all heard it 1,000 times, and it's so profound. It's an old Pashtun proverb that says, you, meaning you of the West, you modern foreigners, you have the watches, but we, the Afghans, have all the time, right? All they had to do was wait us out.
That's right.
They did it with the Brits, they did it with the Russians, and then they did it to the Americans. So I will say probably the single biggest contributing factor to why the Taliban were able to resurge and remain so relevant, the blame firmly lays with Pakistan.
Yeah.
The Taliban were simply a puppet of the ISI, and Steve Cole has written profusely on that subject. There's a ton of research out there as to why the Taliban were never fully eradicated, or co-opted into a future Afghanistan that would have been stable. So
Yeah, when you
we
have a
could go on
safe
about this.
haven like right across the border where you can just retreat to and to open arms, I mean that kind of makes it difficult to eradicate,
Yeah.
and especially when
Yeah.
Pakistan is, for all intents and purposes, trying to be, saying, "Oh no, we're on your side, everything's good, we'll help you out," and it's like, but are you? But that kind of goes probably back to the tribal thing where maybe somebody thought they were on our side, some of them were like, "Yeah, cool, we support you," and then the guys right there in the front lines were like, "No, we don't support you at all." I mean, who knows? Because just as well as I do, most of the people over there, like you said, why are you better than the Taliban? And when we come in, we give them something. They're like, "Cool, I'm on your side now." And then we leave, and then the Taliban comes in, like, "Hey, we're going to give you this." And they're like, "Yeah, all right, cool, we're on your side again." It's just there was no real loyalty to any of us outsiders coming in. They were just about survival, pretty much. So.
Yeah, and when we leave Afghanistan in 2021, so before I went to the 17th, my last conventional deployment, I was there as an air advisor. So I was there training Afghans to talk on a radio to Afghan pilots in an Afghan airplane with guns and rockets and very small bombs, right? I mean, it was an experience.
Yeah.
That's how I'll summarize it. But the system we had created, built on the backs of JTACs for, at that point, 15 plus years, was that the Afghan security defense architecture still relied completely and entirely on our intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities, our precision fires, and they banked on the fact that even if an Afghan commando unit got on their own helicopters with their own mission plan and flew out to their own target, if things really went bad, there was an American somewhere watching it all go down,
right,
with a robot in the sky that could do what they could not.
Yeah.
So in 2021, when we say, hey, we're leaving, well, guess what? Our watches ran out. That's what the Afghans knew. They had all the time. We had the watches. What did we think was going to happen?
Yeah.
Their entire defense architecture fell apart because we pulled out the most important tool, which, oh, by the way, was precision air power controlled by American TACPs. For the most part, there were other JTACs, obviously,
For
but
sure.
That capability that we brought for this 20-year-long war, as soon as we pulled it out, the whole thing fell apart.
Yeah, there's not much you can do about the political aspects of it.
Yeah.
They have agendas that people try. I mean, it just, I don't know. We all set our name on the dotted line and we say, yes, we'll follow the orders of these guys that put us in these situations. And then you get there, and then at that point, it's out of their hands. It's about us and about the guy to the left and the right. But then once you get out of there, it's back in their hands again, and you can't control what they're going to do. Obviously, we can, but we probably could have done that a little bit differently and been a little more successful. But I don't know.
One of the things too is, again, guys just coming out of the pipeline, we're putting an awful lot on your shoulders, especially if we're taking what is really an operational concept and trying to make it into a strategy or even a grand strategy. Whose back are we placing that on?
Yeah.
It's you young guys. It certainly doesn't make it any easier.
It's there. What I want to be clear about, I always hesitate to make these grand strategy critiques and ever make it about the military. Yeah, the military, of course, has its decision-making flaws. It has its execution flaws. We've discussed both of those things at length today, which is important, right? If we don't talk about the hard subjects, then what's the point of this greater posterity effort that we're all a part of, right?
Sure.
Because that you talk about, JD, you made the comment just now. We controlled what we were deployed to do, but when we come back, we lose control because it goes back to the hands of policymakers. That's absolutely true. But this posterity effort that we're talking about today, the books, the articles, the podcasts, what you've been doing with this program, this is us taking some of that control back.
Yeah.
We can control how the story gets told because we were the ones who had to go there and do it. And I think that's a really profound point that I have to insist upon here. As we said, most of Americans don't know what TACPs are. They know that air power was an important part of the war on terror, but they lack all of the context that is so hard to express, whether it's spoken or written form. And what we're doing here is an important step in taking some of that control back, because Lord knows how much blood and treasure we all left there in that country.
Yeah.
I spent most of my time in Afghanistan. I went a few other places as well, but it's a weird thing, but I know you guys can appreciate this. I loved that country.
I was
It's
the
the
same
most
way.
beautiful place on earth. The food was amazing when it didn't make you sick. The people were incredible, and if you went into a village and you conversed or interacted with, they were the most humble and selfless people,
Yeah.
right? I God, the opportunity of just think about putting some ski resorts up in the Hindu Kush.
We
Afghanistan's tourism industry would have been incredible,
yeah.
right?
We talked about
It's
that all the time when
but
we were over there. Yeah. It's like
yeah,
what a great vacation spot, you know?
yeah, and it's just we're all our generations are so ate up about how much we gave in that country, and we knew how beautiful it was. We knew how rich and diverse the people and the ethnicities and the different cultures. We saw how amazing that place could have been,
Yeah.
but for the wars that have been fought there for thousands of years, which is why it got the name the Graveyard of Empires, right? So it's such a difficult place for our generations to know what most of the world doesn't know about that country, and then we know how much we paid to be there and try to make it something that maybe it could have never been in any event, right? We'll never know the answer because 2020 is perfect hindsight.
Yeah. I think the biggest complaint that we all have is that it's you feel like when you go do something, even if you, like I said, you go over there, we did it, we took control while we were there, but you want to feel like you had some sort of impact on something. You want to feel like what you did made some sort of difference, whatever it was. But now it just seems like it never happened. It almost, in some ways.
Well, that's never happened in the history of the United States going to war in a foreign country, right?
Right.
Well, and we are globalizing at such a rapid pace. It's like we're talking about this country that hasn't changed in 2,000 years, except that every kid has a cell phone in his pocket. Um, there's going to 2,000 years from now they're going to look back and it's going to have turned into something much different because we're doing so many things that we put under the label of globalization, but it's happening so unevenly. Some places it's going at a breakneck pace. At other places it's going very, very slowly, but it's going.
Yeah.
So it's easy for grandparents to see their children with a cell phone and realize that, act like they just let the devil into their home,
All right.
you know, and be not so much technology mad as just culturally mad. That's, they might not even be so mad about the J dam that landed in the village marketplace, as they are about the cultural impact of it.
The
You know,
lasting influence is a little bit worse than maybe losing a villager or a house or something. Yeah, I could see. That's a good point.
and
Well,
quite frankly, here in the West, I don't think we understand culture as well as we used to. So they can put on TV how much it cost in dollars, how much it cost in lives, but they can't put on the cost in culture. So that we don't understand the impact we're having on these other cultures where we go in, and unless we can measure that along with everything else, then we're going to continue having problems like this.
yeah, it's we think back to World War II. Steve, again, you use that measuring stick so eloquently in so many different analogies and assessments. There was absolutely no doubt as to our national purpose in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
It was tyranny versus liberal democracy.
Yeah.
We won. The good guys won.
Right.
That's historically indisputable. And then Korea kind of muddied that up a little bit because we didn't understand the enemy. It wasn't a war. It was the first time we've ever used police action as a policy motive power. And then, the Cold War totally changed our understanding of state on state conflict. And then we get into Vietnam, which is this, our first time really having to confront the idea of an insurgency and low threshold warfare. Then, the domestic component of how our society takes the information about wars like, well, we're in Vietnam, but aren't we supposed to be fighting the Soviet Union because they're the adversary? And
Mhm.
now, the proxy warfare becomes a dialogue. And then we get to Desert Storm, and once again, Americans seized on that war because it seemed so clear cut.
Sure.
And then we get into GWAT, and I'll go back again. Our boy Matt Schleich had a brilliant quote to really, it closes out book one, and I loved it so much that I put it in there. He paraphrases that Clint Eastwood movie. I believe it's Heartbreak Ridge. It's like that line from that movie Heartbreak Ridge. Sergeant Major, you're 0-1-1. No wins, one tie, Korea, and one loss, Vietnam. In GWAT, and I'm quoting Matt Schleich now, in GWAT, we're 0-1-1. No wins, one tie, Iraq, and one loss, Afghanistan. But we did not lose that war. Our leaders lost that war.